and we welcome Olle and Tomas Gandit from the Swedish Radio. Olle and Tomas, they are going to tell us how the combination of algorithms and audio clips are reshaping the news strategy of the Swedish Radio. So welcome, Olle and Tomas. The floor is yours.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for inviting us and to have this opportunity to meet you all. And we hope that this presentation from the Swedish Radio will give you a clear idea about some of our audio innovations in news. My name is Olle Zachrisson. I'm head of digital news development here at SR.
And my name is Tomas Granryd, and I'm head of digital partnerships at Swedish Radio.
So the overall strategy of Swedish Radio is to focus on audio on all platforms. Perhaps this doesn't sound so surprising for a public service radio company, but historically we have done a hell of a lot of text on digital platforms. Now we focus on innovating around audio, also digitally, and that's how the playlists for news clips were born that we're going to talk about here today. In this presentation, we will first briefly mention our three strategic audio categories, then go into the specifics of our news clips and the playlists in our app. And at the end, Thomas will show how these clips are also used on smart speakers. So let's do it. Strategically, we have found that it's been very useful to divide our digital audio offering into three different categories: live, podcasts, and clips. All these three categories have their specific challenges, but they are all very important digital assets for a big audio company that aims to be number one in its market. In all three categories, there are a number of crucial questions that we're trying to find sharp answers to. The first one, and of course the most important aspect, is: do we have really compelling journalism? Do we have great presenters in live, in podcasts and clips? A second dimension is the UX, the presentation. How do we present the audio, also visually? How do people interact with it? A third aspect is: what targeted audience do we have? Who are we aiming at? Historically, we have had a lot of cutouts from linear, also digitally, but the audience for a particular digital audio product is, of course, not the same as for a linear radio station, or the FM, as we call it. Fourth aspect is distribution. On what platforms can you find our audio? For example, almost all SR podcasts are, you can find them on Spotify, but not our news clips that we're going to talk about today. And last aspect is data. How refined is our data, and how do we have the right expertise to analyze it? But I know that this live category is especially close to your heart, Thomas.
Yeah, and we see a great potential in the live area, if you go down, where we actually can see, you usually see a live aspect of like an audio stream that you can't do much about, but of course you can innovate around the ability to work with the live stream, the ability to go back in a live stream, doing a live stream chapterized and searchable, as well as offering vertical content that is associated with the horizontal live stream. So in a weird way, I think that we're just in the beginning of exploring the concept of live.
Thanks. In the rest of this presentation, we will, of course, focus on our clips that people can listen to in news playlists in our app, but also elsewhere. So in the SR app, the first thing that meets the visitor is Top News, which is our main playlist for news. This list contains of 15 audio clips with the most important news from Sweden and around the world. Here people can go in at any time to get the latest. The clips come from our national news department, our 26 local radio stations, and departments for sports, culture, and science. All local stations, sports, and so on also have their separate playlists. And the list is updated 24/7. New clips are added within minutes of major news events. The clips are automatically fed from the SR news website, so we don't have to edit two different surfaces. And users can easily navigate and skip between the content. So let's have a look on how it sounds and looks.
Palme-ärendet kommer inte tas upp för ny prövning. Det meddelar överåklagare.
I USA har den första tv-debatten mellan de två presidentkandidaterna Joe Biden och Donald Trump precis avslutats i Cleveland, Ohio. Och det blev en debatt med flera hårda ordväxlingar.
I'm not here to call out his lies. Everybody knows he's a liar.
So you can see here that you can easily skip between the content in the playlist. So it's atomized clips that you can go between or just listen to it as a playlist. You can also find other lists, like this one is for culture, this one is for science, and this one is for sports here. And one really fascinating thing that it's so clear that the audience really appreciates this new form of consuming audio news. We have seen an exponential growth since the start in 2018. And this year, the amount of started clip has doubled compared to last year. During the Corona peak this spring, more than 3.5 million clips a week were played by over 200,000 people. Now that's down a bit, but we're still way over last year's levels. And one pretty amazing thing is that once we get that first click, people stay in average more than 10 minutes. So in a normal session, people listen to maybe 6-7 clips. And we're now focusing on giving people a more dynamic 10 minutes by mixing more clips of different length, topics, and tempo. Another important thing to stress is that this has changed the way we do our stories journalistically. Swedish Radio has around 800 reporters around the country, and all of them are now filing stories in what we call standalone versions, clips that are customized for digital consumption. So they have to be understandable on their own without the traditional radio cue that you normally get from the studio. And as we know, listeners are more likely to turn off or skip on digital platforms. We organize audio labs all over the organization to enhance the way we tell our stories, where we have a strong focus on the first seconds that have to be really compelling to keep people listening. Our analysis shows that the perfect clip is 80 seconds long, and you have to get it within the first 8 seconds. So how do we put these lists together? Traditionally, this has been done manually by our digital editors. But Swedish Radio has now created an editorial algorithm that is now starting to automate these playlists. Every clip is rated in our CMS in 3 dimensions. How big is the story? Does it contain unique public service values? And how long is the lifespan? So this assessment is the editorial fuel that powers the news algorithm and decides the running order in playlists and on our websites. Let's now look a little bit closer on those editorial dimensions that I just mentioned. The first one, the magnitude of the story, is pretty straightforward. There are 4 steps here. Is it an extraordinary story, a large story, a standard story, or a lighter one? When the winner of the US election will be announced, for example, that would certainly be an extraordinary story in this scale. The third dimension is also easy to explain. It's the lifespan. A long lifespan is, for example, for well-crafted investigations or in-depth analysis that we want to surface to the audience for a whole day or two. A short lifespan is, on the other hand, for stories that are very important for maybe an hour or two, like a traffic disturbance or sports results. The second dimension, though, the one highlighted in yellow in the middle here, is more unique to us. And this dimension is deliberately added to the system to support our public service mission. Here we assess if the individual story contains what we call SR values, and we have a checklist to see if it does. For example, we ask ourselves if the story contains unique voices, if we're out reporting in communities, or if it has really compelling audio storytelling. It's because we give special prominence to these values that we think it's fair to call this a public service algorithm. And the very positive thing is that we've seen that including these SR values in the technical systems also changes our journalism. It provokes a discussion. It drives us out of the newsroom to speak to affected people, and it enhances our storytelling. So here, tech and journalistic improvement really walks hand in hand. In the first step of implementing this system, we used it as an internal tool to let our national news department find the most interesting stories from around the country. But now in step 2, we're actually starting to let the news algorithm automate our local playlist. This means that those editorial scores that we stitch to every clip decide where they are surfaced in our news products. In designing this system, it's been very important that the clips don't just work on apps in mobile phones, like the app I showed you, but also in a zero-screen environment, like voice-activated speakers. And I will now hand over to Thomas to speak a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, smart speakers is for radio, of course, a super interesting area, especially when it comes to news. I would say today about 10% plus of Swedes own a smart speaker, and about 5% use them on a daily basis, especially for news. And we see that the number is rising. Unfortunately, today there is only one brand that speaks Swedish, and that is Google. And if you look to countries where there is a massive consumption on smart speakers and massive consumption of news and radio, you can see that they have one thing in common, and those countries have 2 or more brands that speak their native language. We know that Amazon is planning to start their business side in Sweden this coming months or so. So perhaps they will start letting Alexa speak Swedish in the near future. But today we have a couple of actions and skill already on both Google and Amazon. And we are, of course, as well integrated in the narrative news feed on Google. So if you ask Google Home for news, we are today the default provider of news. This area with voice caught our interest quite early. Around 2016 or so was a time when we saw that a lot of people in the States were starting to use Alexa to listen to radio. I mean, the environment in itself is perfect. The radio is, as you know, as it is a smart speaker, it's kind of a zero hand, zero eye experience. So we realized that radio is great for this, and we started when we have to start build genuine knowledge around this area. So a year later, 2017, long before Google or any other device spoke Swedish, we formed a team called PlayX Voice that has ever since then been focusing on building and learning about voice. And I'm really proud to say, very humbly, that this team is probably among the best in Europe in this area. As I said, we are default provider of news in the narrative news section in Google. But how to use the clips, how to use the atom in this area? We thought long and hard about this and came up with the concept of news trains, you could say. In basic, the train consists of the 5 latest news atoms combined to 7 to 10 minutes long show that is presented when you ask for the news. 2 great things about this solution. It is, first, we have pictures already to every clip. I mean, in a 5-minute long news show, there is seldom any specific pictures, but here you have pictures for every news atom. And the second great thing is that we produce, or you could say bake, like a train every time there is a new atom in place. Every time there is a new clip produced, it becomes a new train with the latest atom in front. And that results that we have an extremely good freshness rate. Our news is constantly being updated. And this train of news provides an absolutely latest news 24/7 all around the clock. So here how it looks.
Ge mig de senaste nyheterna.
Här är de senaste nyheterna.
Välkommen! Här är de senaste toppnyheterna från Sveriges Radio.
USAs president Donald Trump har kommit med ännu ett uttalande kring sin politiska motståndare.
Partistyrelsen var djupt oense om beskedet att säga nej till nya banor för snabbtåg. Det uppger Ekots källor. Och han anser att korruptionen är alltför utbredd. Margareta Svensson, Lissabon.
Du har hört de senaste toppnyheterna från Sveriges Radio. Säg prata med Sveriges Radio för att ta del av hela vårt utbud. Tack för att du lyssnar.
But of course, we would like to explore the possibility of the possibility that the atom themselves have, and make the experience much more flexible. Today, you can't really use the atoms or the clips by themselves in a Google environment, but you can in Alexa. Therefore, we have experimented with building a solution where you can skip an atom if you aren't interested in the stuff that you're listening to right now. So you start the news and then you skip it forward if you want to hear the next piece of segment. And the next iteration of this will be that we are looking at the possibility to customize the offering. So let's say that you have listened to the news in the morning, and you later on during lunch want to hear the latest news again. Well, those news atoms that you were presented in the morning will not be presented once again. And of course, this opens up for thoughts around personalized offerings, around interests, and other areas. But this will probably be done when Alexa starts speaking Swedish.
So thank you, Thomas, for that. To sum it up a little bit, we are building a completely new system for audio news at SR, and we have tried to present it to you here today. We think that this is pretty unique, this system, as we are an audio-focused company. So just to sum it up a little bit, all stories are done as atomized clips, and they have to be self-explanatory. That's why we call them standalone clips. These clips are then rated and ranked in our editorial algorithm. These clips can be played in playlists. They can be heard on a wide range of platforms, from mobile phones, our own app, our own website, to smart speakers and the connected car. And this system gives us a large flexibility for future development, we think. We think there's a great potential, for example, for better personalization. We're now experimenting with, for example, including more clips from a certain geography into the national playlist. So you can get all the biggest news from Gothenburg if you live there, also in the national playlist where you can hear the mix with national and international news. So this is one potential with greater personalization. We think there's a potential for newsletters, maybe automatic newsletters, and new AI-powered products. So having a model that is both more technically agile and secures the editorial trust in our news, we think that this is the way forward for Swedish Radio. So that's all we had from Stockholm for the presentational bit, but we are very eager to hear if you have any feedback for us or any questions or comments. So please ask away.
Hi, Ole, and hi, Thomas. How are you doing? Thank you for this presentation. So far we don't have any questions or comments, but you mentioned that newsletters, right? You see a great potential on them. So are you planning to go with the newsletters in the near future?
Yeah, I mean, we can foresee a number of possibilities there. I mean, the great system with having this kind of rating of every news clip, we could pretty easily set up, for example, an automated newsletter with the latest around the US election, for example, but then not just have chronologically the latest news, but sorting that newsletter for the most relevant news. And we think that this is a great aspect of our system, that every clip, every news piece is editorially assessed in this system So we don't just can recommend the latest in a certain topic, but also the most relevant. Of course, we have some newsletters already, but we don't yet have a login at the Swedish Radio. And to have a really good system of newsletters, maybe we have to have a system where people can actually log in before we start sending out those newsletters.
Thank you so much. Well, people doesn't have questions. I don't know if in the studio Vera and Anna would like to ask something.
No, not really. I was checking our live chat to see what's going on. But indeed, there are no questions. Well, there is a very interesting article that was written about the new algorithm. I believe Olle gave an interview to LCE, to the London School of Economics, talking about it and how it can favor public service journalism. So would you like to add something about that, Olle?
Yeah, I mean, look, the word algorithm, of course, is a very controversial word. Sometimes when you mention that word, people get the connotation of commercially driven algorithms, maybe like what you get on Facebook or so on. But we think that it's very important to kind of use really advanced programming, computational power, machine learning, and this kind of editorial algorithm, but to do it in a way that secures the trustworthiness of public service journalism, and also maybe that can actually enhance the quality of our news journalism. And that's why in our system we have included this second dimension that I tried to explain, with those values that we call SR values. And those values came about after a lengthy series of workshops within the Swedish Radio, trying to discuss and trying to find what is the core of public service journalism, and what is the most important aspects of our unique kind of journalism here at SR. And those aspects are, for example, that we don't just want to sit in the studio and sit in the newsroom. We want to be out there in communities speaking to people. And we want to have a really compelling, strong audio storytelling. Or we want to cover areas and geographies that are rarely covered, what we call blank spots. And it's by including those kind of values in this algorithmic system that can also give a kind of a link back to how we conduct our journalism. And I think that this combination is pretty exciting, to actually use a new technical system also to change the way you do your stories. And that's why we maybe a little bit pretentiously call this a public service algorithm, but it's our attempt of kind of including those core values from our public service mission also into the tech.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much for that answer, because there are people who, and many journalists obviously, who still see AI algorithms like a threat to our role as journalists, or to the more to the core values of journalism, right? So this, your answer addresses that and really shows how innovation and technology can actually power journalism and our work, and improve our work also on the field, not only in the newsroom. So I believe the presentation was great. There are no questions. We do have a comment here I'm going to share with you. Litze Young is following us from Singapore. Hi, Lee. And there we go. They really like the insights on ideal clip length, and also about structuring audio clips so that a listener gets it within 8 seconds. So yeah, this really addresses the short attention span nowadays. So Lee here thinks it was good to see that in the presentation as well. I think that yeah, please. Would you like to comment?
I can just add one short thing about that, because that insight came from a really geeky analysis that we did with closely analyzing 800 clips to see what was the completion rate. what were the traits of a specific clip that people actually didn't skip from or didn't stop, but just stayed from the first second to the last second. And then, for example, this was the insight that you have to get it within 8 seconds. You shouldn't have mixed too many voices in a clip because people get confused. And the ideal clip for the completion rate is 80 seconds. And we all know that to get people started to listen to something, it's very important how you start a clip, but the visual presentation and the headline is also so important. So in a way, a finding for us that even if we are focusing more on audio nowadays, we have to strengthen our visual work, especially in the app, because the way you present your audio is also of key importance if people will engage with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, indeed. Thank you so much for those details. And in the meantime, we do have a question from Negra asking if you could give an example how the storytelling may change through an algorithm.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very, very interesting question. I think that our system shows examples of this. For example, in our system, you can see if all the stories that one of our local stations have done that day, if none of those clips contain any SR values, you can see it very clearly on the screen in our CMS, in our internal system. And that will provoke the newsroom to have a discussion like, why don't we have any voices of concern or affected people? Why do we only have telephone interviews? Maybe we should send out a reporter to fetch a voice of an affected person from this news event. So in a way, I think it inspires and almost kicks our butt a little bit to get out of the newsroom. So I would say that is an example, and that happens every day. We have seen in the kind of assessments that we have done of this system.
That's great. Thank you so much, Olle.